All right. It is wonderful to see everyone again. We had an amazing trip in Israel, and looking forward to telling you a little bit more about it, hopefully over Shabbos. Israel's doing fantastic. We ate very, 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 very well, um, and we had a wonderful time. And now we're ready to get back into our learning together. Begin opening of Sefer Shmot. I think one year we did a shear on the name Shemot and why it's called Shemot. So we're not going to focus on that tonight. Um, I wanted to look at the scene in chapter 2 when Moshe encounters Yitro's daughters at the well. So this is for the first piece is kind of like a standalone, just I thought a really interesting observation that I came across. But the bulk of the shear is very much rooted in kind of like more meta studies of Tanakh, of Bible, and what, sort of the I think what's the phrase for it? Biblical type scenes. So there's a type scene in the Bible of wells, and wells associated with betrothals, with weddings. So we'll get there in a little bit, but first, just kind of a bonus piece. So to set the stage, let me share the source sheet. That would be the first thing to do. Okay, so we are in chapter 2. So right, the parsha, the Sefer opens with the description of the Jewish people in Egypt. Paro and his advisors get very scared that the nation of slaves will overpower them and rebel, and so they put all these oppressive orders against them, the drowning of the baby boys, the enslavement, and we're told that this one Jewish baby, Moshe, is born. His parents place him in a basket on the river, right? Interestingly, um, I saw an interpretation that says that by placing him in a basket on the river, they were following the letter of Paro's law, right? Paro said that the babies have to be put in the river. So they did put him in the river. They just added a basket to the equation, and so he was saved. Interestingly, saved by Paro's daughter, who we identify as Batya or Bitya. Um, and he has this kind of dual identity. He is right at the very early stages. He's able to return to his mother, and she serves as his wet nurse. And then he goes to the palace. He grows up presumably in the palace. There's one or two movies that have been made about this. Um, and Anne, I see your iPad is on, but it's muted. So if you want to try unmuting, we'll see if we can hear you.
There it is.
All right, and we hear you. Okay.
Okay, great. All
We
right.
can't see you, but we look forward to hearing your insights and questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. So Moshe has this conflicting identity. He is a prince of Egypt. That's one of the movies that's been made about this episode. Until he goes out and sees the Hebrew slaves um, working out in the, building the pyramids or whatever it is that they're doing. He sees an Egyptian beating up on one of the Hebrew slaves. He kills the Egyptian. The next day, he sees two Hebrew slaves fighting with each other. He intervenes again. They kind of get upset at him, and they say, "Are you going to kill me like you killed the Egyptian?" Moshe knows that his actions are known, and he has to run
There we go.
away.
Okay, take that
And,
away, please.
and so here we are, and right, so he has to run away. Um, and so this is where we pick up chapter 2, verse 15. Vayishma Paro et hadavar hazeh vayivakesh larog et Moshe. Vayivrach Moshe mipnei Paro vayeshev be'eretz Midyan vayeshev al ha'be'er. Paro hears what Moshe did, and he wants to kill Moshe, and so Moshe runs away to Midian, and he comes to a well. Ulechoin Midyan Sheva Banot Vatavona Vatitlana Vatimalena et Harahatim Lashkot Sonavihen. The priest of Midian had 7 daughters. They came to draw water and fill the troughs to water their father's flock. Vayavo Haroim Vayigarshum Vayakam Moshe Vayoshian Vayash Getzonam. The other local shepherds chased these girls away, and Moshe arises and he saves them and he waters the sheep. Vatavona el Reuel avihen vayomer madua miharten bo hayom. They come to their father. He says, "How'd you get back here so quickly?" Presumably, this harassment by the local shepherds was a regular occurrence for them. Um, so he's surprised that they came back so quickly. Tomarna ish mitzri hitzilanu miyad haroim. Begam delo dalalanu vayash getatzon. They say an Egyptian man saved us from the shepherds, and he also helped us water the sheep. Vayomer obnotav v'ayo. Where is this guy? Lama ze azavtin et haish kir'ena lo vayochal lechem. Why did you leave him at the well? Call him so he can come eat bread with us. Vayoa Moshe lashevet et haish vayitain et tzipor bito Moshe. And Moshe desired to live with this man, and he gave Tzipora, his daughter, to Moshe in marriage. So that is our well scene with Moshe. The Medrash in Tanhuma, source number 2, gives an interesting backstory to this, right? It seems a little bit curious about why right, if he's in Midian, why would the daughters of the Midianite priest be tortured or harassed by the local shepherds? You would think that they would be respected, and you'd think that they would be, they maybe even the shepherds would help these girls to water the sheep. Why are they treating them so poorly? So the Medrash tells us, well, it opens with a question. Kol shivcho she'oto tzadik liot holech lo etzel ovdei avodah zara. V'hakadosh baruch hu mekaneh le'ovdei avodah zara. Heyach holech Moshe lemakom ovdei avodah zara. Right, Moshe goes to this place where they worship idols. We know that God hates idolatry, so how could Moshe go and be with these idolaters? Ella, so that it must be that that's not exactly what's going on here. Yitro ro'eh chartumin shela uboser alehen v'hirher lasot teshuva ad shelo yavo Moshe. Yitro came to realize the falsehood of the idols, and he wanted to do tshuva before Moshe came. He calls all the locals of his city, and he says to them, "Up until this point, I have been I've served you. I've been the priest. Achshav ani zaken, b'achu lachem komer acher. Now I'm old. Choose another priest." Amad votzi klei tashmish avodah zara v'natan lahem. So he gives them all his idols, whatever paraphernalia was needed for the local worship. Duhim v'niduhu. They see through his this. They understand that he's rejecting the idolatry, and they excommunicate him. Shlo yistaklo adam v'lo yasulo milacha. That right, no one could have anything to do with him. Shelo yiru et sono, and they wouldn't shepherd his sheep. Ubikesh min aroim lerot et sono v'lo kiblu. He asked the shepherds to help with his sheep. They didn't accept it. And that's why his daughters went out to shepherd. Okay, so it's addressing the question of how Moshe could go to this idolatrous house, why the shepherds were harassing the girls, and also, right, I'm not sure it's such a question because we see in many instances that there are girls involved in watering and shepherding and feeding the animals at the well. But it seems a little curious that why would girls and daughters be the ones to be watering the sheep? So the Medrash addresses that as well. What I thought was really interesting was this observation by Rav Yaakov Meidan. So Rav Meidan, who's one of the Rosh Yeshiva at the Gush, Yeshivat Har Etzion, notes in Shmuel Aleph that Shaul says to the Canaanites, to the Cani, Vayomer Shaul el Cani, lechusu redu mitoch Amaleki, pen osifcha imo, um, withdraw or separate yourselves from the Amalek, right? Shaul is going to battle against Amalek. So he tells these Canim to separate from Amalek, lest they be destroyed with them. Vasita chesed im kol bnei Yisrael ba'alotam mimitzrayim v'yasar keni mitoch Amalek, and you have right. You're deserving of being saved because you have done kindness to the Jewish people when they left Egypt, and so the Canaanites separate themselves from Amalek. If you look in the next two sources from Shoftim, we see that the Canim are descendants of Yitro. Okay, so the Canim are descendants of Yitro. Rav Meidan makes the observation. He says that, it's a little bit of a midrashic read. I'm not sure how he reads it all the way back, but he says basically that from the time of Moshe, the Canim and Amalekim lived side by side in some sort of discomfort, I guess we would say. And so he says that these shepherds that were harassing Yitro's daughters were in fact Amalekites. And so in Moshe rescuing the daughters of Yitro, says it's the first instance of any battle or anyone standing up against Amalek. And so, right, we know that obviously later on, once Moshe ascends to leadership, fighting against Amalek is going to be a very prominent thing that he does. But that even, it's sort of uh, the precursor to that is this instance at the well. This was the first war against Amalek conducted by a representative of the Jewish people. It was a signpost for later generations in their fight against the desert savages. So I thought that was a really interesting uh, bringing this stuff together. Again, kind of standalone, doesn't necessarily fit in to the rest of what we're going to do tonight, but I thought it was an interesting observation. I'll pause if there's any thoughts or questions on that small piece.
When Rav Meidan makes this kind of explanation,
Yeah.
is he operating from a source that he knows and that
So
he would
he
have then cited? Or is this a supposition or a conclusion he's making in order to
he creatively reads it into that medrash that we saw that said that Yitro was rejected or was ostracized by the locals. The medrash says because of his rejection of their idolatry, but he weaves that all together. Um, Again, I'm not sure that it textually works that well, but it is it's an interesting theory.
to
think
create a
I
poetic analysis then?
Yes,
I
yes,
don't think it's so. I mean, he's basically saying that in the time of Shaul, if our tradition says that the Canim are the descendants of Yitro,
right.
and that Shaul tells them to leave from the Amalekites, right? To leave to run away because there's going to be a war against Amalek. So obviously, the Canim are living amongst Amalek, right?
Yeah,
And we also like when it comes to Midian in the whole story of like where is Midian exactly? Well, we know Amalek is kind of in the south, and Midian would also be in the south because it's north of Egypt,
yeah,
right? So it's south of
yeah.
Israel. So there's no reason to not think that there's an
Okay,
intermingling there. Um, but to say that it's because of Avodah Zarah might be a different thing, but loyalty to Bnei Israel at least.
okay. All right. So we can accept or not accept Rav Meidan's read of this. But I thought it was an interesting take, and maybe it does relate to what we'll see a little bit later. Okay, moving on. So the Medrash Rabbah in source number 7 tells us when Moshe comes to the well, Vayeshev Eretz Midian Vayeshev al HaBe'er, Kalat Derech Avot. He absorbed or he learned the way of his forefathers. Shlosha nizdavgu lahem zivugehem min habe'er. There are three who found their bashert, who found their wife at a well. Yitzchak, Yaakov, Umoshe. Right. So again, and I think these stories are somewhat familiar to us. We'll look at them, but and it gives us the sources for Yitzchak and Yaakov, that they found their wife they found their wives at the well. Robert Alter, as we'll see in a little bit, adds two more well scenes to this list. He adds to it Ruth's meeting of Boaz, as well as Shaul's meeting with Shmuel. Okay, so yeah, that last one doesn't quite fit as far if we're looking for marriage, but we'll get there in a moment. Okay, so right, so basically the theory that Robert Alter proposes is that we can see it in source number 8. The expected betrothal type scene begins when a man journeys to a distant land. There he encounters a young woman who has come to a well. As it turns out, she is a member of his extended family. Water is drawn from the well. The young woman rushes home to tell her family about the man's arrival. The man is invited for a meal, and the betrothal is concluded between the man and the young woman. Okay, that's the basic sort of archetype of what the well story is supposed to be, according to this. And then what becomes interesting, and we'll see, is that in each of our encounters, there is sort of something that, right, remember like the Sesame Street song, three of these things are just like the other, right? So there's one detail that sort of sticks out like a sore thumb in all of these stories, which highlights something important. So in the story of Yitzchak, right, remember Yitzchak's marriage? Interestingly, is Yitzchak's not really involved, right? How does Yitzchak get married to Rivka?
With the help of Eliezer.
Yeah, Eliezer goes on the journey, right? Abraham sends the servant to go, and right, he comes to the edge of the town. He's with all his camels, and he says, "I'm going to make a test, and whichever girl, gives me water and gives the camels water, that's how I know that she's the appropriate wife for Yitzchak." And that's exactly what happens, right? We don't have to look at the whole thing, but interestingly is that Yitzchak is absent from this story. It is, right, the Medrash did say that Yitzchak was involved, and it's not a total falsehood to say that, because before he meets Rivka, right, we have the encounter where they meet in the field. But right, how's that introduced? In source number 10, V'Yitzchak ba mibo be'er lachai ro'i v'hu yoshev be'eretz hanegev. So while Eliezer was off finding a wife for Yitzchak, Yitzchak was in a place called Be'er Lachai Ro'i, which means literally a well for the living one who sees me. But he was at a well. So there is a well that figures prominently here as well. A well that figures as well. Okay. Okay. So if we have this sort of archetype of what the well story is supposed to be, what's the crucial difference in Yitzchak's well story?
He doesn't go to the
Is
well
he's not
where
there,
the girl
right?
is. Yeah.
Right. There's a proxy in his place, right? It's not Yitzchak, but it's Eliezer in his place. So Dr. Yael Ziegler, and most of what we're going to say is based on a share that she has on the VBM. She says, right, the most striking deviation from the betrothal scene of Yitzchak and Rivka is that Yitzchak is not present. There's a surrogate for Yitzchak who's never given a name in the narrative, but the servant of Abraham, whom we identify as Eliezer. And she says that this key detail clues us in to the central theme of Yitzchak's life and Yitzchak's mission. What is Yitzchak's mission?
Continue the traditions of his father.
Okay, continue the traditions of his father. So Abraham is the iconoclast. Abraham is the one who trails a new way. What would happen if his son followed in his footsteps of being the radical, the revolutionary? We'd have a new tradition, right? He would undo everything Avram had done. What Avraham needed was a loyal follower, someone who's going to follow and entrench what he had achieved. Um, right, and that this is the theme of Yitzchak's life, right? We know, again, we're not going to look at everything inside, but all the wells that Yitzchak digs are the same wells that Avram had dug. Right? Yitzchak is the person who has to come and kind of fortify and reconfirm whatever Abraham had achieved.
Mhm.
I heard an interesting analogy um, that maybe this is because I'm still on the high of having spent a lot of time learning with Yisrael and Yeshiva, but that if Abraham was like Reb Chaim Brisk, right, who revolutionized the study of Talmud by giving all these tremendous chidushim, all these tremendous new insights and way of approaching it, so Yitzchak was giving a daf yomi shir. He was someone who didn't have the tremendous creative chidushim, but he was someone who really just drilled home the importance of continuing in that tradition. And as Dr. Ziegler writes, Yitzchak's role is to continue Abraham's path, to step gingerly into the very large footprints made by his father. Yitzchak's legacy is his father's legacy. He cannot swerve from it at all. Yitzchak's future, his legacy, is not to be found in his future generations, but in his ability to reflect the past, the legacy of his father. Okay, so Yitzchak, right? So the key detail that sticks out in Yitzchak's betrothal is that he's not there, that he's kind of in the background, and that very much is symbolic of what his life and what his mission is going to be.
Mm.
Okay, so now let's remind ourselves the story of Yaakov. Oh, sorry, I didn't give you that. I didn't display that as I was reading from it. Sorry. Okay, so Yaakov, right? What's Yaakov's well story? He tricks his father Yitzchak. He steals the bracha that was intended for Esav. Esav vows that he's going to now kill Yaakov, and Yaakov has to run away. He's running. He stops. He has the dream. Then he continues, and he comes to a well. And what does he encounter when he comes to the well?
A huge rock.
Well, right, a bunch of shepherds gathered around with their sheep and a huge rock. And there's a rock on the well, and he says, "What's going on here?" And the shepherds tell him, "We can't give water to our sheep until everyone assembles, and we have to roll this rock off the well. We don't want anyone to steal the water, so they need everyone to be there." And at that very moment, he sees Rachel coming onto the scene, enter stage right, and he's overcome by her beauty. And by himself, he rolls this massive rock off the well and starts taking water, and he waters her sheep. And then, right as the pattern that altar identifies, she tells her family this is what happened. They invite Yaakov to come join them for a meal, and he does, and he winds up marrying her. Okay. So what's unique about the Yaakov story, the Yaakov well story? What's the unique detail?
That it's him himself, right?
Okay,
There's no shidduch. There's no parental involvement. He's like dating at the well.
okay. So right, so that's interesting because the first encounter we have is with the shidduch, is with Eliezer, but we said that that's sort of the exception that highlights. So a little bit unclear because right with Moshe also Moshe um, you know he doesn't have someone to make a shidduch for him either. He does it on his own.
Right.
Um,
In a way, sorry, in a way it's a shidduch because Jacob's been sent to find
right.
somebody from his.
Fair enough. Fair enough. So Dr. Ziegler says that the key detail is this stone that's covering the
Mm.
well, right? That we don't see that anywhere else. Um, and so picking up in number 14, um, The singular component of the stone contains the story's central idea. Yaakov is not simply the symbol of one who experiences adversity. More significantly, he is the symbol of one who prevails over adversity. And if we go back up to source number 13, she says this is what Yaakov becomes, right? With the change of his name. Right? And he has this wrestling match with the angel. Vayomer lav ma shemecha, Vayomer Yaakov. The angel asks him, unclear if Yaakov knows it's an angel or what he thinks it is, but this mysterious man asks him, "What is your name?" He says, "Yaakov." Vayomer lo Yaakov yamer od shimcha ki im Yisrael. It says, "Your name is no longer Yaakov. Your name will be Yisrael. Ki sarita im Elokim ve'im anashim vatuchal, because you have striven with beings divine and human and have prevailed." So she says that the central component of Yaakov's life is not only that he encounters much difficulty, but that he overcomes all the difficulty that is thrown his way eventually. Right? He has some miserable and difficult times. If you're right, we read in his when he meets Paro, he says that my days are very few and they've been miserable and all this, but and in the end, everything kind of works out. He overcomes. So to continue with Yael Ziegler, this struggle is evident in the several of the deviances presented in Yaakov's betrothal scene. As noted, this is no peaceful expedition to find a wife. He's fleeing for his life. He has difficulty accessing the water in the well. He's not invited to a meal. He cannot obtain a wife without committing himself to years of hard labor. He does not even receive the wife who he had been promised, but first he has to marry Leah. Nevertheless, as in the rest of the story, Yaakov overcomes these adversities by virtue of his own sheer force of will, emerging a stronger man than before. Okay, so there's this one anomaly in the story, which is the rock, and that rock keys us in to all that will follow in Yaakov's life. Any questions on this? Thoughts?
Why do they have to cover the well with a rock?
Right. So the explanation I've always heard is that it was sort of their way of ensuring that no one would take more than their fair share of the water.
Oh.
That it was, and they intentionally waited till everyone was there so everyone would see how much everyone else was taking. But if they would have been uncovered, then anyone could have taken the water, and it would have been unfair. Okay, so then we come to what Robert Alter identifies as the next well scene. We're skipping Moshe. We'll come back to Moshe because that's really what we're focused on tonight. So we'll do that last. But the story of Shaul. So if you remember, right in Shemot Aleph, this is when we first meet Shaul. He is on a hunt for his father's lost donkeys, and he can't find them anywhere, and he's about to give up and go back home when the servant, the person who's with him, says, I heard that there's some man of God that lives around here. Maybe he can help us find the donkeys. And that man of God, of course, is Shmuel. So with that, source number 15, Hema olim b'malei ha'ir v'hema matzu ne'arot yotzot lish'ov mayim. Vayimu lahen hayesh bazeh haroeh. So they were going on the outskirts of the city in the mountain, and they found girls going out to draw water. And they said, "Is this where the prophet, the seer, lives?" Vatanena otam vatamarna yesh hena lefanecha maher ata ki hayom ba la'ir hizevach hayom la'am babama. They say, "Yes, and you're in luck. He's coming right now to offer up sacrifices." And so go, you'll find him, and eventually they do. And Shaul and Shmuel then begin their very complicated relationship together. So again, this is not a story that ends in marriage. So why does Robert Alter identify this as part of the well theme? Anyone want to venture a guess? Yeah, Avi.
I'm seeing that Avram is the starting point. So Yitzchak is he's the preserver. right?
Hmm.
The preserver, the conserver.
Right.
Yaakov is the struggle to maintain, perhaps,
Okay.
right? And Shaul would be, the first king of an independent people in their land. So in that sense, it's a very different model of what Jewish, so to speak, uh, I guess a characteristic, I might say, of what it means to be Jewish, right? There's a component of preserving, there's a component of struggling, and maybe there's a component over here of like maybe it's a Zionist thing.
Okay. Maybe that could be. I'm not. Certainly she's not taking it as sort of like one continuing sweep of that theme, but right, that was the unique feature of Yitzchak. But I hear what you're saying. It's interesting, and certainly this leads to the institution of the Melech, of the king. So that is what was a crucial step in the Jewish journey. Um, but right, maybe I should have made it more explicit. The obvious anomaly in this story is that there is no marriage, right? That there's an encounter with girls at the well, but it doesn't lead to marriage. And so she says, in source number 16, picking up in the second paragraph, the anomalies in this scene can lead us to draw conclusions similar. Okay, so we haven't seen what she says about Moshe yet. Um, but Shaul's legacy does not lie in his building a dynasty, but rather in launching the kingship. By creating a relationship with the prophet and conveying the idea that no king can function properly without the guidance of a prophet, Shaul properly launches the monarchy. This is his legacy. To make this point, Shaul's betrothal scene is deliberately aborted midstream. Instead of concluding with a marital relationship designed to continue someone's legacy through their descendants, this narrative concludes with the commencement of a different relationship, namely that between king and prophet. Okay, so it emphasizes again that Shaul, as the king, has to have a good working relationship with the prophet. I'm sure there's a lot that we could apply to contemporary political dynamics as well with that idea. But that's the key feature. Okay, one more before we come to Moshe, before we come back to Moshe, and that's the story of roots. So remember the story of roots. There was this sort of successful, wealthy family that flees Beit Lechem to go to Moab because of famine. The two sons marry local girls. The sons die. The husband dies. Naomi, the mother-in-law, is left alone with these two daughters-in-law. She begs them, "I've got nothing. I can't care for you. Go back to your families." Orpah eventually does go back, and Ruth stays with her. They return to Israel, to Beit Lechem, and they're totally impoverished. They have nothing, and so Ruth goes out with all the poor people to gather whatever food she can find. And so we pick up um, in chapter 2 of Ruth. I'll read the Hebrew, I'll show you the English. Naomi modal isha ish gibor chayil mishpachat Elimelech ushmo Boaz. So they have a relative whose name is Boaz. But Tomer Ruth Hamoaviyah el Naomi el Chana Hasadev el Kataba Shibolim. So Ruth tells Naomi, "I'm going to go gather sheaves in the field." Achar Shem Sachin Beinava Tomer La Lechi Biti. Whoever will find favor and let me gather some wheat, I'm going to go. Vatelech vatavo v'telaket b'sadeh acharei hakotrim. Vayiker mikre halakat hasadeh leboaz Hashem mishpachat Elimelech. She goes, she follows after the gatherers, and she happens to go to Boaz's field. Boaz ba mi Beit Lechem vayomer lakotrim Hashem imachem. Boaz comes, he greets his workers. Boaz he sees that there's this new girl among the paupers trying to gather whatever gleanings she can. It's that new Moabite girl who came back with Naomi from Moab. She says, "I'm going to go gather wheat." She's been here since morning. Vayomer Boaz al Ruth, Halo shamat biti, al telchi lilkot b'sadeh acher, v'gam lo tavuri mizeh v'choti dvakin im narotai. So Boaz goes to Ruth. He says, don't go anywhere else. You should always come to my fields to collect wheat. Inaich basadeh asher yiksrun v'halach acharehen, halo tiviti et hanarim levilti negaich. Right? I've told them to treat you kindly, not to bother you. Valach el hakelim v'shatit me'asher yishivun hanarim. And you will go and you will drink from wherever they draw their water. Vatipol al panev vatishtachu arza vatomer elav madua matatichim beinecha lakireni vanochi nachriya. She says, why are you being so nice to me? So what stands out here?
It's inverted.
Oh, say a little bit more, Avi.
I'll pass. Just that it's inverted. It's the man is giving the woman
Right.
water.
So here it's the woman who comes, and it's the right. Where every other story, it's been the man who's been on the journey. There's another crucial detail.
There are no sheep. There's no well.
There's no well. It's supposed to be a paradigm of a well scene, and there's no well, right? So what was Robert Alter thinking? So it seems that if you look in verse 9, right, he does tell her, Shatit me'asher yishavun hanarim. You will drink from wherever they draw their water. So there must be a well present for them to draw water from, but it's not really what we would call a well scene. And so the whole thing is, it's kind of strange. So what Dr. Ziegler identifies here, and again, I don't know if she's doing this just to kind of try to make sense of what Robert Alter writes, or if she really thinks that this should be a well scene. But as she writes, the anomaly in this narrative is clear. The protagonist of this story is not the man, but the woman. We are focused on her marriage, and she is the one for whom we seek a mate. It is Ruth's continuity which we desire. It is her legacy and character traits which we seek to perpetuate. Indeed, this is the very essence of Megillat Ruth. It is Ruth whose character will bring about the Davidic dynasty, etc., etc. Okay, so I think we could add to this that maybe part of the inversion is that it's a well scene without a well, and maybe that feeds into it, is that it's really highlighting that the emphasis here is on Ruth and on her legacy and her her descendants, and Boaz is kind of secondary to all that. Okay. Pause again for any questions or comments.
Well, it's the well that Boaz can ensure that the water would be there for her. So I don't know. There's some of that there, I think.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now we come to Moshe. So what's right? Let's go back to source number 1. What is the anomaly in the Moshe well scene?
The 7 daughters.
Okay.
And that Moshe sits on the well.
Okay, so number 1 is there's 7 daughters, right? That in every other scene we've had, well, with Shaul there was Na'arot, but in the marriage ones there's been 1 girl. That's kind of been the point. But here Moshe has 7 daughters, or counter 7 daughters. So that seems to be the key difference. So what does that indicate to us? So here I thought she offered a really interesting insight, which I think can be developed even further. But she says as follows. The primary problem in Moshe's early life is his inability to find a role model who can help him achieve self-identity. Right, and she says that we have, right, another fancy academic term is a leitmotif. I don't know if I pronounced that correctly, but a common word that repeats over and over in chapter 2 of Shemot is ish, right? Ish mitzri, ish ivri, Hebrew man, an Egyptian man. that Moshe is really looking to try to figure out who he is. Is he Egyptian? Is he Jewish? Is he Hebrew? Where does he fit in? Even more interesting is she noted in a footnote that in the first half of the chapter we actually have the word Yeled. I think she said 7 times, which is a key number. So we have Yeled, and then we have Ish, right? Moshe really is this being whose identity is in formation. Moshe cannot seem to identify with any of the men whom he encounters, neither Egyptian nor Hebrew. Moshe's thirst for justice results in his loss of hope in mankind and his flight away from civilization. And then if we look down a little bit to the next bolded section, unlike Yaakov, who's faced with an inanimate obstacle, Moshe is faced with a human obstacle, a source of human injustice. Moshe's character traits, which emerge in his betrothal scene, are fitting for one who will liberate the Jews from their slavery and become the lawgiver who conveys truth and justice to the world. Right? His difficulty isn't that there's a stone blocking the well, but that there are literal other shepherds that are harassing the girls and perhaps him as well. However, the divergent element that seems to me to be the key in this narrative is that this is the only story in which the man does not actually meet a young girl at a well. Instead, he meets 7 young girls at the well, none of whom has a name, and all of whom are equally designated for marriage. Indeed, the only appellation given to these girls is that they are the daughters of the priest of Midian. It appears that this betrothal scene is not about finding a wife, but primarily about finding a father-in-law, a man, an Ish, who can be a role model for Moshe. The final appearance of the world. Okay, so I thought that was a really interesting insight. Like we know Moshe and Yitro have this really interesting relationship that continues further on in Sefer Shemot, and that Moshe identifying with Yitro as his role model is quite an interesting take on this story. Right? Also, quite ironic that Moshe, who is the ultimate leader of the Jewish people, turns to, his role model is Yitro, is this Midianite priest or former Midianite priest, if we take that first medrash literally that we saw from of Midan. But that, sort of setting the scene for Sefer Shemot and for all of Moshe's life is this need to have a strong and relatable role model that can serve as, and can give him inspiration and can help him to figure out who he's supposed to be. And only once he achieves that can he go on to become the great Moshe that we know and love, which I thought was a really fascinating take on this story.
There are 2 other elements, though, in the story which Rashi pays attention to, and the Rebbe does too. In speaking about Moshe's development, well, his name is drawn from water, right?
Yeah.
So it one would think that since there is water involved in this situation, that he must be paying a good deal of attention to what's going on here himself. The other thing is that there is in the Midrash also and the echo from Rivka's story that the water rose to meet him.
Right.
And that's based upon an unusual word, and that's the vayashk. It's actually a Hiphil form. And it is, in other words, it's contained within our English way. We say he watered the flock. But I was looking at what Rob Hirsch has to say about this root, and it means to saturate, utterly saturate. And so I can understand why the Midrash would seize on it and say, see, just like with Rivka, so also here the water comes out. He brings the water out, and there's water everywhere for the sheep.
Yeah, we could
Uh,
also Vayashk could also, different vowels, but could also mean kiss.
yes, that's also true, right?
Something wet.
But the other problem that they didn't address in their schema of things was really the role of whether he's going to be accepted into a family or not. In each case, we could go through every one of these stories to see what happens with the ones that the protagonist is going to, and
Yeah,
whether they are accepted or not.
right,
And whether in each case there will be things like, well, Rivka wants to get out of there as fast as possible. It's like Yaakov wants to be overdoing his thing and lets everything else go, And the same with Yaakov. He's got to struggle and fight with that family. Well, why would, in this case, in the case with Moshe, why would Yitro accept him? So there's another midrash that says that he was looking around. This issue of idolatry and all of that is right there. The Rebbe accepts all that too. That's the reason for why things were problematic. But he was searching. He was looking everywhere. And that's another midrash also, actually, later on with Yitro. He tried
yeah,
everything. He looked
right,
at
right.
everything.
Yitro was
Yeah,
the ultimate
Yitro
seeker,
looked at
right?
everything. So he knew that betrothals can be made at a well with this particular people, that they've done it before, and it enhanced the likelihood that he could accept Moshe. I mean, this guy's got to be on his guard. Everybody's out to get him. Well, what is it that Moshe did? Yes, he provided the water, but so did a lot of his predecessors. That shows that he's really carrying his tradition, and he's a monotheist. Okay, with a monotheist we can live.
Right,
That's okay for
right.
openers. So it's another way of opening out that relationship too.
Okay, Anne, we're very happy that you were able to figure out your technology so you could share that with us.
Well, it was a combination of various things that had to be
Okay,
worked out, but we did it.
all right,
Thank you.
great.
I
Anyone
was
else?
just I wanted to comment that it's nice the way that this works out in the end. Um, is that the Midrash really fits nicely with this, right? It's that
Mm-hmm.
Yitro has figured out Avodah Zarah is wrong before Moshe has even arrived. Moshe, based on this Midrash, right, we can imagine Moshe being raised divorced from religion. I mean, most of Bnei Israel also had to, they didn't know so much of the story when they're coming out of Mitzrayim. And so Moshe shows up and he needs the father-in-law that now this is the father-in-law that is giving him the truth that he needs to know so that he can, right, go back
Oh,
and deal with that
okay,
injustice,
interesting, right.
right? Kind of
Very
infusing
nice.
that.
Yeah,
Very
sure.
nice. All
Mhm.
right.
I think the rock, I mean, the various reasons for the rock, but I think one of them is that think of a play, and the rock congregates people.
Yeah,
Mhm.
The well or the rock?
The rock.
I
the
did
the
some
rock
looking at
with Yaakov, right?
apparently Sisyphus pushing a rock is a metaphor for spiritual warfare, requiring steadfast effort to resist negative forces through the primary association. Oh, sorry. Some people see that. It's not Sisyphus. Um, hung me out to dry there, AI. But
Yeah.
Can I,
All
so
right,
can I add my 2 cents to the
please.
um, just carrying on what everybody else said? I agree that the midrash that you started with does make a lot of sense with the idea that Moshe needed a role model, and that Yitro provided one, in the sense that Moshe has to learn something new, and he has to put himself against what he's grown up with. And
Right,
it's him doing.
right, and to have the ability to reject what had been given to him, or what
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
All
Yeah.
right.
The Kabbalah of it is that the water is to represent chesed. So very often it does. And this was the test for Moshe to see if he could bring chesed into a situation in which he'd abandoned all these other people for quite a long time. He's been working with sheep, but not that many people. Is he
Yeah.
going to be able to act with kindness? And he didn't go after the shepherds to try and kill them or something. He wasn't into that. He was just concentrating on the chesed part of it. So it shows that he's ready for the next step.
All right.
This journey.
Beautiful. Beautiful. We'll end with that. It's great to be back learning together with everyone. And
Wow, good to have you back.
Avi,
And-
love to your dear wife.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank God. She's
all
doing
right.
well.
Excellent to hear.
Yes.
She's doing
Excellent to
okay.
hear.
Yeah.
Oh,
Have a-
Baruch
Yes.
Thanks
Hashem.
everyone for the
Baruch
support too.
Hashem.
It's been great.
Have a good night, everyone. A good rest of the week, and hopefully we'll
Thank
see
you, Rabbi.
everyone on Shabbos.
On Shabbos.
All right. Take care. Laila Tov.
You too.
Light Tov.